there's one way that culture disciples us that we must overcome if we're going to be like Jesus. And that one thing in my mind is how the culture polarizes us. We're discipled every day. We're in our camps, we're in our algorithm. It's rich versus poor, it's black versus white, it's men versus women. It's all of these things. And what we see consistently in the life of Jesus is he goes right through all of those categories and he meets and cares for and loves everyone.
Welcome to the New City Podcast. We are sitting here in the studio today, and we are talking about our new series for the city. And Brian and I have had a chance to preach on this, but this has been a big thing. It's been coming for a while. Us coming into Easter, trying to talk a little bit about what is our heart for the lost, and what is our heart for the city, and what does that look like? And so I'm here with Brian Kruckenberg. Welcome.
It's great to be here.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, everybody out there. So yeah, already in this short series that we've had thus far, we're going to be doing it all the way until Easter, obviously. I'm already convicted when it comes to things like evangelism and how so often, especially as you've been a Christian for a long time, like both of us have now, and we work at churches. And so it's so easy for us to get trapped into our little world and do our ministry and not, it's sad to say, but I just confess that, have that heart for the lost. I mean, you taught about that in week 1, and man, it's a convicting thing.
Totally. And it's so funny. I had a lot of people in the church come up and go, man, that was so convicting. I really needed to hear that. And I kept responding, so did I. It's like, it is. You get in the church world and we're looking at different things. We have Sunday mornings coming up, and every now and then to pop our head above water and to go, okay, let's be reminded why we're here. Why are we even doing church? Because Jesus saved us, right? We were lost people and then we became found. And so I think that for this series, there's so much in the church that's always like this, but taking a step back and saying, it's not something we graduate past. Like, we have to pause and remember to have a heart for the city. We have to remember that we were lost too, And so I think that was that sort of first week when I was coming in, when we were talking about the series, and that first verse that was in our shared Excel spreadsheet that we look at for our preaching schedule, and that passage in Luke about the lost sheep and going after the one. And I said, kind of in the beginning of the message, it doesn't make sense on a P&L sheet. You're like, okay, you got 99 over there, just like it's good. You lost one, that's okay. But his heart for the lost, for somebody who's wandering, for somebody who doesn't have a shepherd. And you see so much when Jesus said he looks with compassion at the crowds because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And reminding myself that I am a sheep with a shepherd. I have a savior who went and saved me when I was lost. And after, I've been on staff at churches for 22 years. I got saved when, I was a teenager, and coming back to that and reminding myself, like, I was once lost too. And it's a scary thing to be lost. It's easy to kind of lose that empathy for people who, they're going through life. They don't know what's going on. They're facing the same hardships or harder hardships than we're facing, or easier hardships than we're facing. And they're facing it completely alone, trying to do what they can to get information from YouTube or social media and their friends, and people going, oh, I think maybe this or that. And they're really sheep without a shepherd. And I think if we don't have that sort of empathy and that care, then we're really missing out on the sort of foundational piece of why do we care about the city? Why do we care about the lost,
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing I've been reflecting on, even the title of this sermon series is For the City. Yeah. And I know you shared this, but at New City, we have our vision, we have our values, our mission statement, but we also took time to carve out like what makes New City unique, if I can use that word. And we have these 3 words: that we're authentic, that we're sacred, and this is more than one word, it's 3 words, it's for the city. And it was our 15th anniversary just, recently. And so obviously that makes you look back and reflect and think of the beginning. Yeah. And again, going back to that idea in the beginning, when you start a church, it's all about the city. It's all because you're like, we don't have anybody here, you know?
Yeah.
And so obviously you reach Christians when you start a church, but really the heart is for those who don't know Jesus. And it's been good for me to even reflect back and go, to rekindle some of that and to have that heart, because really, yes, to your, you made this point, we do gather the saints together. And that's important, right?
Yes.
It's important that we are believers gathered together.
Yeah.
But from the very beginning of the church, Jesus sent people out, and Jesus himself had so many conversations with so many different types of people. And the heart of your sermon was, of course, because he's God in the flesh.
Yeah.
And God has a heart for the lost. And so if we're going to call ourselves Jesus followers, we better have that same heart for the lost.
Totally. And one thing that's really hit me in the sermon, kind of coming to it, and as somebody who prepares sermons, you get surprised as you're preparing sermons sometimes. And I was going through it, and I was, thinking about all the different Christians I've come across that care for the city really well, or care for the poor really well. And then I thought about people who just don't think about them at all, and I'm kind of going, well, what are these two sort of things that we might approach, two different areas that we might approach this in a way that's not healthy. And then I thought about this framework of either you see the lost as problems or you see them as projects. And the projects people, to me, are the ones that are like, I care for the poor and the lost, and they value that, and they're going out, and it might start in a really good spot, but all their identity is wrapped around, are these people getting better? Am I making a difference? Am I, and a lot of times I see people like that eventually start to burn out because they're looking at everyone around them with judgmental eyes going, you don't care about them like I do. I'm doing way more than you are. And all of it subtly is this message of, I have to try to make people better, and you need to be making people better too. And eventually the sad thing is, a lot of times I see people like that, the gospel falls away because everything is about how do I make people better? And then they end up just kind of floating out into theological no man's land. And I've seen it time and time again. Then you've got the problems people who are like, I don't really want to touch the lost because they're a problem, and they're more of an ideological problem. And so I feel better being like a keyboard warrior, just going, I'm standing against all the things that they're for. And that's important. I mean, we don't want the world to disciple us, but in that instance, it's like you're looking at them with judgmental eyes, and you're forgetting that you're lost. And I think that was everything in my sermon, was kind of going, we need to, yes, care for people, but we're not doing it out of our own strength. We're not just trying to do something that's helpful to people, and we could look back and go, oh, wow, I helped a lot of people. We're trying to introduce them to Jesus. It's a completely different paradigm. And I think that when we're looking at the lost, it's so easy to get into those camps and to get unhealthy in the way that we look at them. And I was looking at myself, and I'm like, man, I think I've been the projects guy before, where I'm just going, I'm really working with this person and I'm hoping this happens. And then they relapse, or they leave the church, or they do something. And I go, oh man, like what could I have done more, And then I start to go, okay, well, they just have a problem. There's an ideological issue, and I just want to stand against that issue. And I think we're just forgetting that they are lost sheep. And that's why I think that perspective is so important, to come back and to go, no, I too was lost. And not just lost. Ephesians says I was dead in my trespasses. Colossians says I was an enemy of God. Like that was where I was at, opposed to everything that God was doing. And then the Lord shifted my heart through the gospel, and I started to see things clearly. And I think when we just kind of lose that first love, when we lose that first understanding of why are we even here on earth, it's to proclaim the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, Jesus, and his gospel to a lost world. So I think it's just so vitally important to keep that, like I said, that sort of, it's maybe an overused phrase, but in empathy toward people, understanding our own story and going, man, I would have been sunk without Jesus.
Yeah. No, I think all that's really good. And I think some of these themes will probably crop up throughout the entire sermon series, obviously, because our heart has to really come first in, I think, evangelism. I think for me, it's because I've been a believer for a long time now, it's going back to kind of what you were saying. It's like my life without Christ and my life before Christ. And, recognizing and realizing that, gosh, but for the grace of God, saving me.
Yeah.
And then having the hope that I have. I'm not perfect in my hope. There's times when I forget my hope,
for sure.
But like really seeing other people, again, not as a problem, not as a project, but how do we see them? And I know this is cliche, but how do we see them as Christ sees them?
Yeah.
And, and he does see them. And that word, we've been using the word lost. And I've been in conversations before. It's like, well, should we call people lost? And that's kind of offensive or whatever. And
sure.
I'm like, well, that's the language we see in the scripture,
Jesus
right?
says,
Jesus said, I came to seek and save those
lost.
who are lost.
Yes.
And I do think too, oftentimes, this may be going a little bit different direction here, but like if we just would, one, recognize our own lostness, understand that we've been found by Christ, and then really recognizing that people are lost, because I do think that every person I've ever talked to, once they've become a believer, they'd be the first person to tell you, no, I was lost.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep. And I think sometimes in the church, maybe we don't want to use harsh language and we don't want to build barriers with our language, but we also don't want to shy away from the language of the scripture.
Yeah.
And Jesus tells all sorts of parables. It's the lost sheep and the lost coin, right?
Yeah.
And the buried treasure. And it's like, okay, that should help inform. No, people really, really are searching.
Yeah.
And they're searching in a lot of places that will never bring them fulfillment. And they really, truly are lost. Yeah. And we need to partner with God in what he's already doing, because we know that God's pursuing people all the time. And so often I have to be reminded of, you can meet with somebody and they look all put together and they on the outside, they look like they are not lost.
Yes.
They look like the furthest thing from being lost.
Yeah.
But recognizing, man, if they don't know Jesus, there is a part of them that they'll never truly find until they meet him. Yeah,
and I think that there's something about, and I told a story about getting lost in Cambodia one time, and I was 18, and it was scary. This is pre-cell phone. I'm like in the jungle of Cambodia, lost. And I remember how vulnerable I felt. I remember how scared I felt because I didn't know what to do. And had somebody come up to me and said, hey, you look lost. I know how to find your way home. I'd be like, thank you. Tell me, because I'm desperate,
Yeah.
And I think that's what we forget all the time when we're interacting with people who, maybe on the outside, they're sort of white collar, all put together and everything's good. And when you drill down into people's lives, they innately know that they feel lost. And I think there's a reason why Jesus and all parables in Matthew 15 or in Luke 15 are about lost things being found. And then understanding too that I think there can be, I remember I was at a conference I was talking about evangelism one time, and I always have kind of a love-hate relationship with like the evangelism conversation in the church, because sometimes it's people that are like, you got to be doing more. And so then you feel this sort of shame, and then you feel this sort of like, okay, I'm going to do something different, And this guy got up, and it was so refreshing. He just got up and he said, hey, stop trying to be evangelists. Stop trying to evangelize. What you really are missing is you're not tasting and seeing that the Lord is good and reminding yourself that he's so much better than everything else. He said, then evangelism comes a lot easier. When you realize, you think about it as like I'm trying to tell somebody to come to my religion, and that's how they see it. And you start running these scenarios in your head, like, how are they going to view what I'm saying? And we end up trying to craft something. Here's the 5 questions you should ask, get someone positioned, At the end of the day, when you're in somebody's life and you really care about them and you've really tasted and seen that the Lord is good, then it starts to become this, I hate to use the word easy, but it starts to become a lot easier, where you go, well, I know that you don't know Jesus, and I'm telling you, like, you could go to any one of these dozen churches here in the Valley and it's going to be amazing, but I'm going to tell you that Jesus is the only way you're going to be found. And when you have that sort of deep faith, like that deep foundation of I've tasted and seen the Lord is good, then I think those conversations start to become a little less nuts and bolts, like how do I force myself to be more evangelistic, and a little bit more like how do I remind myself of how good God is in my life. And then when I run into my neighbor who's saying, gosh, our marriage is starting to fall apart, I could go, wow, what a great opportunity for me to tell you about Jesus, who loves me and has done so much in my life, And I think that's the kind of danger when you get a little I don't know how to use the word, like overeducated in the word, in the evangelism world. And you're like, okay, what are the strategies? And it's good things to talk about as a church, no doubt. But I think even when I was preaching my message, the thing that I ended on is a John Piper quote, which John Piper always is like a little bit intense. But he said this, he said, missions is not the ultimate goal of the church, worship is. Missions exist because worship doesn't. Which I love that line. Worship is ultimate, not missions, because God is ultimate, not man. When this age is over and the countless millions of the redeemed fall on their faces before the throne of God, missions will be no more. It is a temporary necessity, but worship abides forever. And I think for me, that's like that kind of the heart of evangelism in a funny way, to say, really, ultimately, if we don't have that high perspective of God, if we're not going, I see you for how big you are and the fact that you care about me and have a plan for me and for our church here in Central Phoenix, like the fact that you are actually doing that you came and sought me after, like what else can I do but worship? And then the overflow of that is, well, then I got to tell other people about it, And I know it seems overly simplistic in a lot of ways, but I feel like I'm getting more and more convinced the more we cultivate that mindset, the easier evangelism starts to look,
Yeah. No, I think that's so true. And as you were talking, one thought kept coming to my head was, I've heard often like discipleship pitted against evangelism, or not pitted against, but like, oh, we're good at discipleship at our church, for instance, and we're not good at evangelism. And I heard a pastor talk about this a long time ago. A church kind of classified themselves. So we're great at discipleship, but we're not great at evangelism. Yeah. And he just tells a story about going and meeting with their leadership. And he's like, well, if you are great at discipleship, making disciples, then you shouldn't have any problem with evangelism because true disciples are telling other people about Jesus. And then he said, what you might have a problem here is you may not have as many disciples as you think you have. Yes. Yeah. And I resonate with what you're saying about evangelism feeling like it's there's a methodology and there's steps. It's the 5 steps, and it's like all these things. And I'm going to be talking about this in a different sermon coming up in the series about making the most of every opportunity. Sure. Yeah. But I do think, and this is where it becomes convicting, is like, if I'm a disciple of Jesus, I should be sharing my faith because God will be giving me opportunities. And where is my heart? Where's my heart of worship? Right? Because true disciples are worshipers of God. And I don't just mean like singing worship. Totally. I mean with our whole lives. Yep. And therefore, evangelism, to your point, should flow a little bit more naturally. Yeah. And I do think and you talked about this a little bit this Sunday, but I think we end up just kind of trying to pit different mindsets against each other when really the biblical view is it all works in concert. You know, it's like, seeker-sensitive church, we're really good at seeking, the lost, and we're maybe not so good at, and you're going, no, it's all kind of a package deal. Like we're to make this, it's the Great Commission, right? Go and make disciples of all the nations, teaching them to obey all my commandments. And the outflow of that really pouring your life into somebody should be an outflow of them pouring their lives into other people, that sort of multiplication that happens in the church. And it's been happening like that for 2,000 years. It's nothing new right now. But I do think, ultimately kind of cultivating that heart for the lost is so key. One of the things, I'll pivot into what you were preaching about this Sunday. And I love that you and I were talking a little bit before this, that I was talking to some of our interns, and we were reading a book together, and in the book it talked about Jesus having meals with people, and the author in the book pointed out that in especially the Gospel of Luke,
there are so many stories of Jesus sitting and having a meal with somebody. And sometimes it was really offensive to people, the people that they were sitting with. And Che on our team, he responded and he was like, hey, I kind of made me wonder, like, who did Jesus have meals with? Like, if you look at all, and I looked it up. I was like, that's a great question. I'm going, oh man, Matthew, the tax collector, and, you've got him eating at the table of a leper, and you've got him, going to Zacchaeus' house, who is very hated. Like all of these different people, and he's sitting and eating with them, and he's being with them. And I think one of the things you're pointing out is in our culture, things are so divided, and it leaks into the church. It's an us and them. Even in evangelism, like we're kind of prone to go, I'm on this team and you're on that team. But Jesus didn't have that.
Yeah, no, it's challenging. Like the story of Zacchaeus. He's the chief tax collector. And so had to be one of the most hated guys in the city.
Yeah.
But he was rich, and it actually says that in the text. He was a tax collector and was rich. And so I think about, who would that guy be? That guy's different to different sides, right? But there's controversy going on right now with respect to the U.S. men's hockey team. I know I'm the sports guy, but
I'm following some of it. I'm following some of it.
If you're not going to follow United States hockey during the Olympics, you may never follow sports in your life.
Exactly.
But like, they're invited to the White House, and people are like, some people are like, oh, that's so, and I'm like, I know this isn't in the same vein of these stories, but there is a similarity there. Yeah. It's like, why wouldn't you receive that invitation? Just because there's a political, maybe if you're a believer, and then, because I've thought in the past, and I've been convicted on this, like, if that person, and I wouldn't hang out with that person, because that person represents everything I'm not.
Yes.
And that,
or what might people think about me? Yeah.
What would somebody think about me if they're like, oh, you were having dinner with that guy?
Yes. Yeah.
And it's a convicting thing, because Jesus was like, no, I'm going to go have dinner with this guy, and
he never worries about it.
Never worries about it. And, he goes, then Simon the Pharisee again, different group of people hated this guy. But, and Simon invites him in for dinner, and we can get from the context, we don't know really Simon's motives there. I think it was to catch Jesus doing something he didn't like. And of course, then Jesus has this interaction with this woman of the city. That's how she's labeled. Yeah. And so we see these two opposite ends of society, and Jesus is having community with both of them.
Yes.
And he doesn't worry about what people are going to think or say. His heart is for his heart is really for all people, and it's, in essence, everybody needs Jesus. And Zacchaeus needed him. Simon the Pharisee, unfortunately, we don't know how he ultimately responds to Jesus, and this story seems to kind of judge Jesus. But I do think it has made me think more about, there's certain people I follow online. I'm like, man, I don't like this person. Yeah. I just don't like this person.
Yeah.
But would I sit down and have a meal with them?
Yeah.
I mean, according to everything my Savior teaches me, the answer to that should be yes. And again, I don't want to paint with too broad of a brush and and look at but just I think what Jesus always does is the heart. What's your heart towards that person?
Yeah. And it's so funny, because I think we tend to say like, oh, things have never been more polarized. And you go, well, okay, in American politics, for sure, it's getting really polarized. But you look at even Jesus' disciples, I think it's Simon the disciple, right? Who's a zealot. And the zealots were known for like randomly stabbing Roman soldiers. Like they were very much like the fringe, sort of like, and that guy is sitting there at a Pharisee's table or at a tax collector's table, who represents all the oppression of Rome that guy hates. To imagine there wasn't tension in that room is silly. Like, there was intense tension there. And yet Jesus, there's like, I think for me, there's moments where I get a little taste of what is it like to just kind of separate yourself from the world and to go, I'll connect with anybody that the Lord's putting in my place. And no matter what people think about this person, and these two people really hate each other, what if I was with both of them together? What would I do? that is exactly what Jesus was doing. And you use this great word polemic, which I've only heard in graduate school, but it's like, it's a great word, but it's a good example of this is where our society is now. But then remembering, Jesus had that too. Things were very intense at that time. And there were people that never mixed, and yet he did that. But you could see, and you were talking about all of that sort of polarization that happens in our culture and how it really affects the way that we look at people around us.
Yeah, and I think, so here, if I were to give Christians a pass, what I would say, like conservative, Bible-believing Christians, I think one of our fears is we think, if I'm in relationship with this person, that means I'm endorsing everything that they believe. And I do, and I said this, it doesn't mean that we as Bible-believing Christians run away from the truth of the Bible, right? Yeah. Ultimately, who Jesus is, his revealed word, his heart, his character, natural law, all the things that we take as God's truth. Jesus isn't asking us to discard those things, right? For the sake of being winsome. People use that word. But I come back to it where he's convicted me as the heart and going, okay, I could sit and have a conversation with this person, and knowing that person I'm on some text threads with people who I disagree with a lot when it comes to certain societal issues. And sometimes they'll be like, I can't believe, so-and-so, I'll give you one guess of who so-and-so is, said this or did. And I'm like, I'm not here to defend everything some politician does or says. And so you kind of have to take some of that too, because they'll do it to us too, right? Like they'll accuse, so they can have a hard heart towards us. But what we can't have, what we as Christians should, is have the heart of Christ and going, I'll sit down with the zealot. I'll sit down with the person who's living a loose life, so to speak. I'll sit down with the legalist or the politician who's working for a corrupt government or whatever it might be, because that's everything Jesus did. And kind of comes back to where we started, because lost people exist in all these different spheres.
Yeah. And I think too, it's a bit of a mirror when we think about our perspective of like, who would we sit down, with? And by that, I mean, do we believe that the forces of darkness are stronger than the forces of light? Do we fear that if we sit with somebody who thinks differently than us, that it's going to infect us with something dark? Or do we believe that the light in us is brighter than that? And I think about church leaders I respect, maybe like a John Piper or something. If I saw him sitting down at dinner with a blue-haired Antifa, non-Christian, like the person you go, they're the furthest from Jesus. If I saw them sitting at a table, would I go, John Piper's slipping? Or would I go, great, I'm so glad that person is connecting with somebody who represents a light, which is way stronger than the darkness, you know? And of course, Jesus got flack. They're like, oh, you're sitting and eating and drinking with these people, And he was fine with, if there was social media at this time, people would be like, look at Jesus. I got a picture of him hanging out with a Pharisee or a prostitute or something, And really, ultimately, you're like, well, if Jesus went through that, we're going to go through that too. Yep. People are not going to know our motives. They're not going to know the deeper things in our heart. But I do think if we have a real heart to sit with people and tell them about Jesus, we will inevitably sit with people that would on the outside go, that's tainting to you, Now there's good boundaries in your life and all. There's a million caveats I would throw on that, But yet at the same time, I think our main problem is it's not that we're not, that we're sitting too much with people who don't know Jesus. It's that we're not sitting enough with people who don't know Jesus. And I just say that even for myself. Like, I don't know if I do that enough. And then coming back to that idea of, do I really believe the light in me and that the gospel is stronger than any worldview that this person is going to espouse? And then looking at Jesus going, he was doing that. Like, he was bringing light into the dark places.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah.
And the last thought I have with respect to this conversation, at least I think it's one of the last thoughts, is just that I talked about judgment, and Jesus warns us about that. He's like, with the measure you judge, it'll be measured back to you. With the And so again, I know the heart of most sincere Christians are like, oh, I'm not judging, but I'm pointing out sin, and I get that.
Yeah,
I totally understand that, but I do think we make judgments that Jesus wouldn't make. To what you were saying. It's like, am I so concerned that, if I went out to dinner with this person, then, I somehow, people are going to think I'm tainted, and all of those things and go, but also like, man, where is my heart of judgment? It's stopping me from even considering that sort of thing. Yeah. And do I care for all these different people? Yeah. Jesus cared for all people, and so no one likes to feel judged. And I think so often we want to jump to the truth and we forget the grace and truth. We want to jump straight to truth. Yeah. And I said it on Sunday that I preached this sermon that judgmentalism repels relationship, and so how are our hearts soft towards people? Again, I feel like I have to keep saying this. I get a little voice in the back of my head. Again, not overlooking sin, not saying truth, none of that. Yeah. But like, I want Christians to be like, and I want New City, to be a church that's welcoming to everybody, that like, whether it's, Zacchaeus or it's the woman of the city or even Simon the Pharisee, like everybody would feel like, hey, I can come and I can at least explore who Jesus is in this context. And so that's my heart for our church and for our city.
Yeah. And I think, coming full circle back to Luke 15, the last parable, the prodigal son, I think there are so many stories that Jesus tells and different parables he says that are so confronting to that idea of judgment, and you've got this guy who goes off, and I mean, how offensive is it to tell his dad, like, hey, and even when you look at like kind of historical background, to tell your dad like, hey, give me my inheritance now. That means I kind of wish you were dead because I want the money that you want. Like, so offensive, so like should have broken relationship all over the place. Goes off, does his thing. And the fact that the father is standing at the road, like looking for his son and is so happy. And the older son is like, Dad, I've been here. I've been faithful. And he's like, I understand that, son. And I so value that. That's great. But your younger brother has come back and we should celebrate it. And it's right to do that, And I think that's so confronting, especially like you're a Pharisee listening to that story. It's kind of like, Or he tells us the parable of the workers who go out and they work all day. And then the last hour of the day, they go out and hire somebody and he hands the same wages out to everyone. And they're like, what? That's not fair. I've been here all day, And I think all of that is this confronting that thing in us that really just always wants to elevate ourselves. Like, hey, and at the same time, when you're looking at Jesus' perspective, it's that understanding of, man, I was a prodigal son. He did that for me. So when somebody goes off and squanders everything, I'm not supposed to just go, well, dude, you made your bed, now lie in it, Yep. I'm supposed to go, well, let me bring you back into the family, like with open arms, a ring on your finger and the family robe. Like all of those sort of parables, I think, are pushing us to understand when lost things are found, it's beautiful. And I think if there's anything that's convicting for me, I'm like, gosh, have I remembered that? Am I remembering that sort of first love of the gospel going out and changing people's lives, not because I worked so hard to do it, but because the Holy Spirit did something in their life that we could all celebrate now this prodigal son has returned, And I think that's the thing that we're probably in the series going to keep coming back to, but it's worth hitting from a bunch of different perspectives, because it's something that we need to remember.
Yeah. 100%. I think that wraps it up pretty well. Kind of goes back to the beginning, that heart. And we're all sinners in need of a Savior. And we were once all lost. And if we've been found in Jesus, that's something we're celebrating. And that's something worth remembering when we're looking at other people and not letting our hearts grow cold, and realizing and recognizing that Jesus praise Jesus.
Yeah.
He found me worthy, he found you worthy of saving. And so who am I to say that Jesus doesn't want to reach those people that we think are just so far off that have, and in particular, people who have probably hurt us, or, or a certain type of person who has hurt us. A certain category of person who has said things that have been offensive, and maybe they truly have been offensive. And so again, this isn't about forgetting all the hurts, but it is about realizing who you are, but for the grace of Christ, and then extending that same grace and love to other people.
Yeah, it's awesome. That's awesome. Well, that's our prayer for this series. I'm really looking forward to the coming weeks. I think we're going to unpack a lot more of that. And thank you so much for joining us. Make sure you follow us on YouTube and anywhere else where we're at. It's on the app as well. You can follow it there. But thank you so much for joining us. Have a great day.